never forget that your vessel is a sword in the right hand of God. To him the spoils. Thomas nodded, and La Valette turned to ease himself through the gap in the ship's rail and down to join the 4 men in the small craft bobbing beside the bow of the galley. The captain had growled an order, and the other men had set to the oars, stroking the small craft across the sea. They had been swiftly swallowed up by the darkness as Thomas stared after them. Now, hours later, too many hours it seemed, Thomas's mind was filled with fear for his captain. La Valette had been gone for too long. Dawn was not far off, and unless the captain returned soon, it would be impossible to take advantage of the cover of night to spring their attack upon the Turks. What if La Valette and his men had been captured? The unbidden thought caused a deep chill in Thomas's heart. The Turks often delighted in the torture and protracted death of any knights of the order who fell into their hands. Then another alarming thought occurred to him. If La Valette was lost, then the burden of command would fall on his shoulders, and he knew with a sickening certainty that he was not ready to captain the galley. He sensed movement close behind him, and quickly looked over his shoulder as a tall figure ascended the short flight of steps to the small foredeck. The man was bareheaded, and his body was bulked out by a padded gambeson beneath a dark circuit, whose white cross was faintly discernible in the light from the stars. Oliver Stokely was a year older than Thomas, but had joined the order more recently and was therefore his junior. Despite that, the two had become friends. "Any sign of the captain?" Thomas could not help a faint smile at the needless question. He was not the only one whose nerves were being exercised by the long wait. "Not yet, Oliver," he said, affecting an untroubled air. "If he leaves it much longer, then we'll have to call it off." "I doubt he will do that." "Really?" Stokely sniffed. "Without the element of surprise, we risk losing more men than we can afford." It was a fair point, Thomas mused. There were fewer than 500 knights still with the order on Malta. The unending war against the Turk had its price in blood, and it was proving increasingly difficult to replenish the ranks. With the kingdoms of Europe at war amongst themselves and the strict entry requirements for those joining the order, the number of young nobles presenting themselves for selection was dwindling. In the past, a veteran like La Valette could have gone to sea with a dozen younger knights on his galley, eager to prove themselves. Now he had to make do with 5, of whom only Thomas had faced the Turks in battle. Despite that, Thomas knew his captain well enough to know that he would not refuse a fight unless the odds were overwhelming. La Valette's heart burned with religious zeal, inflamed still more by the thirst for vengeance for the suffering he had endured as a slave, chained to a slim wooden bench in a Turkish galley many years ago. La Valette was fortunate to have been ransomed. Most of those condemned to the galleys were worked to death, tormented by thirst, starvation, and the agony of the sores caused by the heavy iron used to shackle them in place. For that reason, Thomas reflected, La Valette would fight, whether he succeeded in surprising the enemy or not. "What if something has happened to him?" Stokely glanced round to make sure that they were not overheard by the men on the main deck. "If the captain is lost, then someone will have to take command." Here it comes, Thomas thought. Stokely was about to stake his claim. He must assert himself before his friend did so. "I will take his place, as his appointed lieutenant, in the event of his death or capture. You know that." "But I have been a knight somewhat longer than you," Stokely replied in a restrained whisper. "It would be best if I was captain. The men would prefer to be led by someone with more experience. Come, my friend, surely you can see that." Whatever Stokely might think, the truth was that Thomas's fighting prowess had been noticed from the outset by his superiors. In his first action, he had commanded a raid on a small port on the coast near Algiers and captured a galleon laden with spices. After that, he had been posted to serve La Valette, the most daring and successful of the order's captains, to wage